Those that nope the FCK out of a relationship. What was your they are probably crazy red flag moment? He went through the messages on my phone twice. Each time was after a fight because he knew I would have ranted to my friend about it. Then he tried starting a fight about what he read. Got harassed by him for 3 months after I ended it. Only stopped when I had to get a police officer to go tell him he's not to be anywhere near me anymore or contact me. Found out his first girlfriend got a restraining order against him for the same reasons. Especially frightening when you take into account we were only 17. Told me she couldn't have a baby because something was wrong with her. I thought, oh well, that sucks, but whatever. Constantly asking me about baby related stuff and how she really wants a baby even though she told me she can't. Started to wonder what was up at this point. Went on holiday for a month. Came back and was still dating her and talking constantly, but she had blocked me on Facebook. Getting massive red flags at this point. Started acting altogether really weird. Asked her what was going on and that I just wanted her to be honest. Turned out she was pregnant and is now a single mother. Think I dodged a bullet. My second comment on this thread. Met a guy at a club. We kissed and I gave him my number. Started feeling bad as the night progressed, so went home. Ended up really sick with gastro. The one where you finally get to sleep only to wake up. Vomit. Wish for death then pass out again. It was a 24-hour bug in total. In that time he had left 30 missed calls and messages on my phone. I did not arrange a date with him. Or call him back. I had only met him the night before. Not really a relationship. But a first date. I was 19 and a junior in college at the time. One of my TAs asked me out. I believe he was 3 years older than I. He picked me up at my apartment and I let him in while I finished getting ready. He started telling me how he could teach me so much about the world and life in general and how I had so much to learn. Blah. 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 Basically, he was saying I was his inferior but he'd be happy to teach me until I was more at his level. It was really a WTF moment. Why someone would think the way to a girl's heart was to disparage her intelligence and tell her how superior you were. I showed him to the door and locked it behind him. I was seriously waiting for him to FCK with my final grade. But he didn't. Which is good because I would have rained some sh*t down on his stupid head. Man. I was such a dumbass. So many warning signs. She used to disappear and not come home at night. Not answer her phone. Etc. Then. She got pregnant and broke the news by telling me that she flushed her birth control. I respect a woman's right to choose. So now I have a lovely 12-year-old daughter. I still didn't leave. When my daughter was born, she started doing the same thing again. Drinking, screaming, etc. I broke up with her and we started sharing our daughter 1/2 and 1/2. A bit later I transferred to university and stupidly decided to give it one more shot. After living at uni with her and our daughter, I found out all of her trips back home were to have an affair. I was like, what the FCK? I am in college. Work 2 jobs. Take care of the baby. You know. So I noped out. I have had full-time custody of my daughter for 10 years. And her craziness gave me the best gift I have ever received. We dated for a few weeks and then the night came to get down. Since having sex doesn't happen often for me, I don't typically keep a condom in my wallet or on my person. She says she wants to FCK and I tell her I don't have a condom. To which she replies it's fine. Being the HRNY non-thinker I got to work. As I'm ready to CM I start pulling out. She grabs my hips and pulls me back inside her and says in me. And of course, that being the hottest thing I've ever heard a woman say to me. I finish inside her. A few weeks go by and she tells me she's late and to be prepared to be a father. Not the most ideal situation, but I put myself in it. I'm going to see it through. Another 2 days go by and she's in tears. I ask what the matter was and she said she got her period. I looked confused and she yelled, I wanted to have a child with you and it didn't work and now we have to try again. Double quote. I've never ghosted someone so fast in my life. I thanked her for advice that she had given me by texting thanks for the advice, and she flipped the FCK out, asking me why I always have to be so sarcastic and passive aggressive. She could not believe that I legitimately thought it was thankful. Don't remember what it was anymore though. This is precisely the same red flag I just posted about, except in a somewhat different form. Same underlying issue though. People constantly discovering problems that don't actually exist. As a general rule, people who don't trust others aren't very trustworthy themselves. We went to an amusement park and she demanded we rode the same ride 4 times in a row and would throw a fit anytime I suggested anything else. The line for that ride was over 2 hours each time, and we basically waited in lines for the whole day. The line for that ride was over 2 hours each time. That's a complete disaster. It would have to be a bloody great ride to be worth waiting 2 hours for even once. If it's getting to that point, they probably want to operate a ticket system. Mind you, if this was Disneyland, they'd probably use that convenience as an excuse to screw you out of even more money. She pulled out a knife and started running in circles around the house with it. I was on a bus back home the next day. Edit. I guess I should provide a little context. The short version. Right before that, she was mad about something her cousin had done, so she came in to complain to me about it. I was busy reading Harry Potter and not listening to what she was saying, so she hauled off and punched me in the balls. She immediately had my attention. I jumped up all what the fuck, and she started to try to punch me. I grabbed her by her tiny wrists and stopped her. She settled down a little and I let her go. Then she went and grabbed a knife and started circling the house. In the end she said she wanted to cut herself and not me. But I wasn't cool with any of that. The long version involved her dad raping her, her mother in prison, she lived with her grandma, she got pregnant, her grandma died of cancer, she lived with a teacher, the teacher kicked her out because we made the sexy times, she lived with my grandma, she lost the baby, we graduated, we got on a bus and moved across the country to live with her aunt. And then the short version. I had a girl request that we have sex outside, in the woods. We met online, naturally. Anyway, we head out to a nice spot and do the deed. She begins sobbing after. I ask her if everything is alright, and she reassures me that it is. Then proceeds to tell me about how she was raped in the woods a couple years back while continuing to sob. She broke every bit of glass, plate, window, mirror in our house, took a knife to the sofa, and smashed in the TV. Spent the night driving around drunk looking for me. I was 2 blocks away at my best amigo's house. Located me, physically assaulted me in front of my friends, and then drove to her parents' house. Grabbed her father's hunting shotgun, and told her parents she was going to blow her head off. She spent 2 weeks in a locked ward and was diagnosed with adult onset schizophrenia. She was legitimately crazy. I didn't wash a bowl in the sink before work. I said I went to do it but got distracted and I didn't. He decided to teach me a lesson by speeding the car up and then slamming the brakes on and stopped before hitting the car in front of us, stopped at the lights. Then turned to me and said I was going to smash into them. But I didn't. Yeah, he didn't last long after that. It was weird, and looking back it didn't make sense what he said, but it scared the shit out of me at the time. The guy was 35, unemployed, and lived in the rental apartment in his parents' house, all things I had no issue with. What got me to nope out on a dime was when he got sick and I offered to go with him to the doctor, get him medicines, make him some soup and tea, etc. And he told me that his mother had already taken care of all of that. We had also been going out for some time, at least a few months, and despite essentially living with his parents he never let us meet, and he said he barely mentioned me to them. Clearly there was no room for me in this relationship. She demanded that I hand over my debit card, because she, who had never been employed, was clearly better with money than me. Screamed and fought until I have in. Then spent $400 of my money, our money. After less than a year, supposedly on the wedding of someone I went to high school with. Then she got pregnant. Then she lost the baby. And told me that I killed my baby. Not by violence, but by not obeying her every command as if it were the word of God. That my refusal to acquiesce to her increasingly insane demands stressed her out so much she miscarried. I cried for the first time in 15 years. Like a bitch. Killed in the bathtub. And noped out. She was a self-centered CNT who always played the victim. When he couldn't understand why my child's father wouldn't be happy to sign away his parental rights to him and just disappear from our daughter's life. We had been only casually dating for maybe 2 months at the time. And I was still a long way from even allowing him to meet my child. Much less let him adopt her. So, yeah. Prematurity aside. The fact that he considered it a given that an unmarried divorced dad would jump at the chance to abandon his children made him extremely unattractive instantly. Oh. He also wanted to delete our FB pages and make a couples one. At 2 months. I cuddled up next to him and put my hand in the inside of his thigh. He pushed it away and said that's a real turn off. This was after I started noticing he'd shut me down anytime I initiated sex kissing etc. He had to be the one to do it. On his terms. I quickly broke up with him and he stalked and harassed me for over a year and had to get a restraining order against him. Guy asked me to move in with him on our second date. He lived in a remote house somewhere on the Oregon coast and at the time I lived in Portland. Was pretty sure if I did move in I'd never be heard from again haha. Also told me about how every other girl he dated seemed to be embarrassed of him and wouldn't introduce him to her friends and eventually they got scared off and hoped I wouldn't be like them. Yeah. Nope. Went to McDonald's where a pretty 19-year-old blonde girl took my order. I got my food to go and left. As I was leaving I looked back and saw her cleaning the windows. She looked at me and signed call me. So I went back in and she gave me her number. Cool so far. Right? So we made plans for her to come over that night. I went to pick her up and she had this big bag full of clothes and a puppy. She came over and that's when I realized she moved in. She wasn't there to date me. She was there to move in. Next day she goes to work and she leaves all her shit there. So I'm alone with all her stuff. And I do what any normal person who just met a girl who moved in does. I snooped. I went in her purse and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a doctor's prescription with the handwritten instructions that said in big letters no sex for 2 weeks. It was dated 2 days earlier. Apparently she had chlamydia or something. Took me about a week to get her and that dog out of the house, meaning it took her a week to find another dude to stay with. She wanted me to come study for finals at her house so I could spend time with her when I wasn't studying. She was incredibly clingy. Never had a day to myself, and then I went to her funeral. Told her I couldn't text because my coach passed and I needed to pay respects. And when I got out I texted her. And she said something along the lines of where the FCK were you? Why weren't you texting me? What's so important you couldn't text me? I said my coach's funeral. I told you I was going to it fine that was the official nope. Apostrophe. Threw a tantrum in her parents' home because she couldn't find her snowboarding pants before our trip the next morning. That had been planned for weeks. Not an adult tantrum where you're passive aggressive and talk a lot of shitty after resolving the problem. A child tantrum where she yelled at her sister and started wailing and slamming doors. Realized I was dating somebody no better than the kids that cry on the floor at supermarkets. Not that I'm noping the FCK out. But my girlfriend of 7 years and I just got into a massive fight because I booked my CFA LVL1 finance designation and want to be back at home. We're overseas on a uni exchange in September to study, which is cutting into our travel time after grad exchange. I've stressed how important this is to me professionally for months. And despite never having made concrete plans of how long we'd travel, now apparently I'm ruining her life experience by wanting to go home earlier than her. I would never put my own leisure ambitions above anything professional or school oriented of hers. Let alone make her feel like shitty for how it would impact me. Feels like it's shifted from us to me and I don't know if I can get over that. Or if I'm in the wrong too for not respecting her new goals. Been a week or two now. Seems to me like the red flag that this relationship might have reached its cap. I met a bartender who also happened to be an archaeologist. We planned to go see a comedy show together. We both enjoy stand-up. We were texting back and forth and we kinda touched on the concept that we might end up dating regularly. I said I wouldn't usually date archaeologists as they're always digging up the past. I thought it was equal parts playful and funny. She responded with a tirade about how that kind of joke was completely unacceptable and that she was too much of a feminist for that bullshit. I tried to reason that I was only trying to make her laugh. But as I did, I also realized I have no interest in a person who reacts this way. Nope. On the way to my grandmother's funeral, he said, I didn't cry when my grandmother died completely unprompted. He barely knew his grandmother. We ended up getting stuck in the mud on our way. And rather than wait for the tow truck I'd called, he decided he was going to push my minivan out of freshly rained on clay by himself despite my repeatedly asking him not to, as it was obviously fruitless, and I had to buy the clothes he was wearing because he didn't have anything funeral appropriate. He tried, and failed, anyway. But luckily a nice man in a Jeep came by and pulled us out. I thanked the Jeep guy profusely, and told him he'd improved my day more than he knew. Boyfriend sulked the entire day. And after the funeral told me I was ungrateful and rude to have thanked Jeep guy more than I thanked him. And asked if I would FCK Jeep guy, who was probably 20 years older than me, if I ran into him. When I told him to leave me alone, he asked why I was always pushing him away. I dated his guy for a few months. And found out a month or so into our relationship that he had an Instagram account I didn't know about. Wasn't a big deal. I'm not huge into social media anyways. I tried following him. But for some reason I couldn't. I asked him about it. And he played it off saying something must be up with the app. One of my best friends ended up following him a little while later. And my boyfriend at the time didn't know I was friends with this person and accepted. My friend sends me all these screenshots of my boyfriend's Instagram account. Turns out he was a drug dealer using his Instagram to sell all kinds of drugs. I realized he had blocked me and hid his lifestyle from me during our 4-month relationship. I broke up with him that day. I met her ex. Completely by chance. He was a totally normal guy who thanked me for jumping on the grenade. I laughed and said she's a little goofy. But he was overstating it. He showed me his text history from the last several months, which includes some of the time we were together. It was a completely different level of crazy. I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me thought it was fake. Part of me thought maybe their relationship wasn't healthy and made her a little crazy. I couldn't wrap my head around it. When I saw her later, I asked. About 10 minutes into the ensuing argument, she was accusing me of colluding with her ex to make her kill herself in shame and threatening to have her Marine brother beat me to death. I called her best friend and said she was off the deep end and I left. She didn't do anything beyond harass me and a bit of light cyber stalking for a couple weeks. We had only been together about a month. And I think if I were in deeper it may have gotten much worse. 1. Played Smack My BTCH up at an uncomfortably loud volume when I got into the car on our first date. 2. Told a Holocaust joke on our first real date. Knew my family is Jewish. I asked him not to tell jokes like that, so he told a racist one. 3. On our first date told me he planned to have a wife and child in the next few years. I was in my early 20s and had just gotten out of a particularly painful long-term relationship, which he knew about. 4. Told me he didn't know what it was like to feel empathy, and that he had never felt bad for someone or anything he had ever done, even when he knew it was mean cruel. 5. Said the reason for my previous partner's suicide was because I wouldn't let anyone get close to me. The funny thing is I don't actually think I have bad taste in men. All of the above examples are from the beginning stages of relationships dates that IGTFO of. I'm friends with all of my previous partners but one. We just aren't the same people anymore. And my fiance is the most wonderful man I've ever met. We broke up. It was a mutual decision. It just wasn't working out. I still had feelings for her though and was pretty heartbroken. I legitimately thought she was the one. A couple days later the harassing phone calls texts started coming in. I made the mistake of fighting back and the harassment continued. Then she started using her friends' phones to harass me cause I blocked her number. Changed my number and never heard from her again. Was over her just like that, which made me realize that I wasn't in love with her in the first place. Extremely f***ing grateful that I didn't get stuck with her. Probably no one will see this so late but oh well. He told me he has never hurt a woman in his life. But when he was angry he would yell at me that I should hurt myself. Knowing full well that I have a history of depression, self-harm and suicidal tendencies. Also when he wasn't around he'd completely ignore me for days on end. Then expect an hour by hour account of what I had done when he wasn't there. Oh, and he didn't want me to have any friends. He literally told me they'd be getting the happy parts of my day that only he should get to see. Apostrophe. He told me the bruises on his neck were from his father strangling him and holding him up against the wall. Turns out he was messing with another chick and they were hikes. I felt pretty stupid for ever believing him. It was over after that. About a year later we ended up at the same party and he tried to dance with me. And then texted me after the fact saying he was sorry for everything and I was like yeah. I'm not doing this again and that was it. My first high school BF was super manipulative and since it was my first real boyfriend I really fell for it. When I started to grow apart from him he would get suicidal and cut his wrist claiming it was my fault. The final straw was when I broke up with him and he called me saying he was dying that he cut his wrists and was bleeding out. I called his house phone and was sobbing telling his dad what was going on. His dad said no, he's sitting in the living room playing video games. That was the end of the relationship for good. I met a girl. We talked for about a month. Went on a few dates, etc. She was, for some reason, not interested in having sex, but I chalked that up to her being one of those people that likes to establish a relationship first and that was fine by me. The problem, however, arose when she texted me one night while I was out with friends, seemingly out of the blue, to tell me she was ready to have sex. I told her I was out with friends and asked if she wanted to go out later that week. And that's when things got kind of weird. She started demanding that I stop what I was doing and come FCK right then. She said that if I didn't she would find someone who would, and started insulting me for not putting sex with her above everything else. Safe to say we didn't talk much after that. On top of that I heard from a mutual friend about a year later that she had told several people the exact story but backwards, so that I was the one demanding sex. Good times. She has a terrifying victim complex and was truly a toxic manipulator. She would constantly label every single person in her life as abusers if they voiced how upset she made them feel or how nasty she was being. Literally everyone from parents and friends to her little sister. She accused me of being an emotional abuser whenever I wanted to leave the relationship, because not wanting to be with her was breaking my promise to never leave her, which made me an abuser. When I finally dumped her she created a whole Tumblr blog 5 months later dedicated to claiming she was an abuse survivor with all sorts of batshit crazy claims such as how I withheld emotional affection from her as a method of abuse manipulation. I fell out of love with her. Dumped her ass because I couldn't tolerate her toxicity anymore. She wrote personal things about me. Things I had told her in trust relating my depression etc, and the rest of the blog is just filled with severely ironic reblogs from abuse support blogs such as how to survive abuse, how to spot an abuser, 30 signs you are in an emotionally abusive relationship. The blog went on for almost 2 years, with absolutely no contact or reply from me in all that time. Dodge a bullet. We were dating on and off for 2 years. One time we went on our usual Friday rides to the beach. This one time, we stopped to look at the beach. And after a while he started to pull my pants down without my permission, and he also started taking off his pants. I pushed him and told him not to do it, but he got angry and almost hit me. I started to cry and he put his pants back on and started demanding my trust. He dropped me off at McDonald's and that's when I realized that he wasn't for me. That moment was freaking scary. He showed me how far he could go and how dangerous he could be. Also, I'm sorry if I misspelled anything. English isn't my first language. We were exclusive but hadn't really hooked up yet. So one night we're drinking wine and making out and I start giving this guy a hand job. After a while, he loudly narrates that he's super close but then immediately stands up and goes to the bathroom. I'm baffled and sit there for a couple of minutes half naked and confused. He comes back with his erection gone and apologies. And asks to start over. Rinse and repeat. This happens 4 times. Like he's close. Get ups and leaves. Comes back flaccid. I ask him what's happening and if he's okay and he's super cagey about it. His eyes are bloodshot and dilated and he keeps sniffling though. So in retrospect I'm assuming he was doing drugs. By this point, I'm frustrated. Not in the mood. And super tipsy to his stone cold sober. I didn't want to do anything sexual anymore. He tries to get me off and I refuse. And have to continually do so for 10 minutes both verbally and slapping his hands away. Eventually he sits there and jacks himself off and gets his boys all over my underwear because he hoped his sperm would soothe my craving. Double quote. I kicked him out and kept his portal game. Not technically a relationship. But first date. Dude spends the entire time talking about getting locked in a Polish hospital's psych after flying to Warsaw to visit his internet girlfriend. He then proceeded to tell me how much I look like her and how she changed her phone number, all social media accounts, and blocked him on everything. And how she was a crazy BTCH for making him go to the hospital. Dude then abruptly changes topic and calls his friend living in residence to ask if he could borrow his room. I politely excused myself during that phone call and hailed a cab outside. I could list 25 red flags. But here's what did it. An argument started around midnight. As I was going to bed. She could never let an argument die down. Instantly I knew this would be 2-3 hours of hell. I however had a big test at 9 AM. 30 minutes in. I started giving her warning that this was not going to happen as I have a test. I then made it worse by predicting all the usual ways the argument would go. That made it worse. She told me to just admit we are through. I asked if that meant I could go to sleep. That made it more worse. So I said yes. I explained if she loved me she wouldn't attempt to sabotage my test taking ability by keeping me up. And at no point will I be saying another word. I explained if she left the room I would be locking the door. End of conversation. We are done. This conversation is over now. Don't ask me if I'm being serious. I 100% am. We are done. Dot. I went to sleep. Took that test like a boss. And then went for a epic and free feeling Chipotle to celebrate my freedom. She told me a story about how she once had a stalker that would stand in her backyard and stare at her through her window at night and call her and tell her he liked her bra, the color of it, etc. It got weirder when she took me out to her backyard to show me the exact spot where he was standing, even though she claimed to never have seen him. She told me many other wild facts, that she thought it was this guy that went to school with us but she wouldn't tell me his name. That she got letters from him claiming he was in love with her. Things like that. But none of them added up and it was so completely obviously a lie. The final nail in the 2x4 was when I got a Facebook message from her mom on Facebook trying to convince me that her daughter was telling the truth when it was obviously her that got onto her mom's Facebook and sent me the message. I completely ended contact with her after that. She broke up with me while we were fucking. Like mid-coitus DCK in VG. No, I cheated on you because I don't think I'm good enough for you. After this we should see other people too. I just stopped and stared for a long f***ing time before I was ready to talk. Which resulted in her leaving me a crying mess that she could be so self-destructive and hate herself that much. 4 months later she asked if we could get back together and was so upset that I noped the hell out of that one. Then she dipped out of my life completely when she found out I had been seeing her boss after bitching at me for not waiting for her to get her shit straight before I started f***ing people she knew. I didn't even know they worked at the same King Soopers till then. I met her in a bar. She was cool. Always had great conversations. And she could hang. She had some major psychiatric issues that she didn't mention until a few months in. but I could see the red flags. She was on antidepressants for a few attempted suicides. So one day we're hanging out in her bedroom at her parents' house. She gets frustrated while studying and starts beating the shit out of the wall. Honestly, she ripped a section off the wall a 2x4 feet poster could barely hide. I stuck it out for another year until she had lost it on me about how selfish I am that we hang out with her family all day. But I won't stay for a 10 PM dinner. She dug her nails into my forearm. Enough to bleed. I got out of her car and walked home. Left her stuff for her stepdad to pick up. And never saw her again. Got mad at me because I couldn't get to the VA hospital that was a little over an hour away from my house. I was cooking dinner for my 2 young children and don't have any family near to watch them on such short notice. He said I obviously didn't care about him at all and he wished he would have just died in Iraq. Yeah, no standard mental abuse. I have since found out that he is a con artist and 3-time felon who was never in the army and ultimately wasn't in the hospital that day. Just trying to get attention and knew I couldn't get to the hospital, so yeah. I am currently working on collecting information on his past to get him for stolen valor. He shouldn't have tried to mind FCK someone who was raised by Marines and takes stolen valor as serious as I do. Each TD.